This week we spoke to Annabelle Padwick. Annabelle is a gardener, author and therapist who used gardening to soothe her own mental health issues. Our conversation looked at her journey with mental health and how gardening and nature helped her, and how lockdown may change the way we view nature and wellbeing. As ever, if you enjoy the episode, please give us a rating and a review on iTunes. Hi Annabelle, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. So, like I was saying just then, to start with, we always ask about what your kind of personal experiences around mental health are, but then also with you, your kind of professional experiences as well.
Yeah, so I'll try and keep it a little bit shorter than as long as it can be. But I think I've always, until more recently, I'd always struggled with some aspect of mental ill health, I suppose, from even if you're looking at it as far as like low confidence, that sort of thing. As a child, I suppose when I was little and I was in my house and with just my family, I was probably quite confident and outgoing. But then as soon as I was in, for example, like school, I was really insecure, had really low confidence and really didn't understand how to make friends. And went into secondary school, and then I found that you had those cliques of people, and I felt like I didn't really want to be in a particular clique. I wanted to be friends with everyone, but that's not acceptable when you're in secondary school. It's not cool. So I sort of struggled between trying to be friends with everybody, but then just being on my own quite a bit as well, because that didn't seem to work. So I'd always struggled with the confidence side of stuff anyway. And then as I then got older and became an adult, I suppose I still struggled. And looking back, actually, I thought I was really confident, but actually I was probably quite vulnerable. So I put myself into probably a lot of situations that were very vulnerable, but at the time thinking, oh, it's fine, like I'm just super confident, that's what it is. But it wasn't. It was definitely vulnerability more than anything. That meant that different situations happened. And then when I was 21, I suddenly got labyrinthitis, which is an ear infection that probably a lot of people have had over the time. And basically it makes everything spin. So you can't really stand up or anything, otherwise you just fall over and bounce off the walls, is what I did. So you basically have to lie down indoors until it goes. And so that's what I did. But then when I got better from that, what it left me with was a severe anxiety where I couldn't even go out my front door for the fear that I would go out again and everything would start spinning again and I'd fall over. And in the way anxiety works and those sorts of things work, obviously then I catastrophized it even more to the point where I just wouldn't go out. And I went to my GP and told them how I was feeling, and they sort of said, okay, well, you can either take tablets, which I didn't want to do at that point, or you can have group CBT therapy, so cognitive behavioural therapy. So I thought I would give that a go, and decided that after about 3 sessions, I really didn't like it at all. I think it can work for some people, and actually CBT as a general therapy is amazing. But I found with the group sessions, actually what it did for me was it was a group of people all in the same situation, which is quite nice in the sense that you realise you're not on your own, especially when you're in a home environment. At that point I was, where nobody really understood it. But the downside to it was everyone was in the same boat. So if you were trying to have some positive motivation around you, you couldn't get that in that environment because everyone was just very much flat. So I stopped doing that and decided there was no other alternative option for me. So it went through a process of sort of throwing myself in the deep end, which led to a series of panic attacks over and over again. But I thought, this is the only way I'm going to get better, is if I force myself outside. And it took, I'd say, at least 2 years to get to the point where I was probably comfortable outside. But that took me from talking to people on the phone, from going outside my front door, to when I got home, carrying 2 things around in my handbag for 2 years. That meant that I was okay in my head. It became a coping mechanism. until about 2 years later, when I realized that I'd forgotten one of those things, and that perhaps, and I'd been okay, so maybe I didn't need them. Then I gradually sort of just stopped taking them out with me, and it's gradually got better over the years. But what I found is that I never really hadn't dealt with that. And then that relationship I was in the time then broke down a few years later, and was an horrific breakup that was really traumatic, and that I probably thought I'd dealt with, but at that point definitely hadn't dealt with it any time in the next couple of years. I still hadn't dealt with it. That I stayed single for about a year, and then I went into another relationship, which at the time I thought was good, but actually if I dealt with all the trauma and everything that had happened throughout my life, I definitely wouldn't have gone on to that other relationship, which then turned out to be an abusive, toxic relationship for about 2.5 years. And then out of that, I then decided that I needed to get out of that relationship, but I did the whole leave, go back. And when you're in it, when you're not in it, you think you would never do that. And you hear stories about it, and you think, why do people go back? And then actually when you're in it, it's totally, you can see it, you can understand it, because you're doing it yourself. And then eventually got to a point where it was too much, and I left. And I managed to get out of that situation, and it went to court and all those sorts of things. And then I had about a year of psychotherapy alongside my allotment. So just as I went into that relationship, I got an allotment. Didn't have a clue what I was doing, but for some reason I thought it's going to give me something to hold on to. It might give me a purpose. It might help with my mental health. I don't know why I thought that. I just thought it was just this thing in my head that went, just give it a go. So I started growing my own food and documenting my whole journey online as a blog. So that was in 2015. And then it's sort of the nature of growing my own food totally changed my life, alongside I had a year of psychotherapy sort of at the same time as the sentencing a bit later on. But it between those two things of growing my own food and watching everything, those seeds that look like nothing, suddenly with a bit of nurture and a bit of care from me, turn into giant pumpkins or marrows or carrots or whatever it was. And that was all me. There's a bit of obviously there's nature involved as well, but that was me putting that effort in, and it shows me that I can achieve stuff and I can do stuff. And my allotment and garden was the space where I could go to escape the relationship, to escape work, to escape university, because I was juggling work and uni at the same time as well. And it was just where I could go and sit and be around all these things that I had grown, and that was all me, and that gave me hope. All those seeds gave me hope that I could stay focused for another 6 months, and I could turn that into some produce and things. So yeah, it was between the combination of the gardening and the psychotherapy that massively then totally changed my life and my outlook, which is then why I decided that I had the plan for about 2 years, about 2 years ago, to get better. So I was in the middle of psychotherapy then, get better, and then what if I could create a series of programs that I'd never had throughout my life, that were a combination of growing my own food and CBT style psychotherapy that I'd had at a private mental health hospital that was totally one-to-one, which a lot of people can't afford. What if I could combine those basic combinations of both into those series of programs? So that's what I then spent a long time doing. And then eventually last year I quit my old career, which was totally different career, and decided to start delivering the programs. So now that's what I do. So I work into primary and secondary schools, supporting all ages, and boys and girls. At the moment, before lockdown, it was predominantly girls, so teenage girls, which people say, oh, that's probably the most challenging, isn't it? Is teenagers. But actually for me, and it is the most challenging, but if you get it right, it's the most rewarding as well. Because I think if you can help people at that time, which is such a weird, scary time anyway, even if you're not struggling with mental health, then you can make a big difference and set them up for life, really, with a lot more skills. So I do that, and then another 2 days a week I set up an adult therapy site, which is just opened in the last couple of weeks because of lockdown. So I've been able to have the first adults come on site and choose their own allotment plots. So yes, I think that's about what I do now. And then I do lots of writing, whether that's articles and books, and then just lots of talking about what I do, really.
Yeah, that's really impressive, and I think from from what I've heard, kind of on the grapevine, the most impressive thing might be being able to get an allotment, because aren't they? Don't they have massive waiting times to get?
Yeah, so I think some have got. I've heard of people that have waited like 12 years, like crazy amounts of time for one. I was when I got mine, so I was 26 when I got no 27 when I got mine, but I had only waited. I had about a 6 month wait, which is pretty good actually. But when I got it, it was an overgrown total mess, which then made it really tricky because then you're starting from total mess, not from a sort of a blank canvas. So you've already got a challenge on your hands before you've even really started. Um, but yeah, so no, it's nice to be able to now give back, create mini allotments and give them to other people as a blank canvas without all the weeds in them in the first place.
Yeah, so just to kind of go back to what you were talking about at the start, when you went in to see your doctor and you got offered group CBT or medication. What I think I had probably almost exactly the same offer. Medication straight away or CBT in a group setting, but there was a massive waiting time for the group setting. What was, and I didn't take up the medication because I was kind of, at the time I kind of worried that that it would kind of alter my personality or something like that. What was your aversion to accepting the medication, and did you kind of feel that it was just like I kind of felt that it was just a bit of a sticking plaster, and actually it's kind of been borne out that I needed to address kind of the root causes of my issue and then medication became helpful. But what was it for you?
Yeah, I think you've nailed it right there. I think I'm generally very anti tablets anyway. I always have been. My mum's a nurse, so I think I've always had that idea around me. But then obviously I think two things that struck me was that I was literally in that doctor's surgery for what, 5 minutes? Because the appointment 10 minutes. I was in there for 5 minutes. They'd never heard anything about my anxiety before until that point. And within 5 minutes, they were offering me medication. And for me, I actually found that quite shocking because I thought, you don't actually, I've just told you I feel anxious and I don't want to go outside. That's all I've pretty much told you. And you already want to give me tablets and you don't actually know where it's come from, why it's happening, or ask me any other further questions. So I think that worried me anyway. And I just thought it was all a bit rushed, just to give me medication for something. When they didn't actually know if that might be the right thing or nothing. It just felt like, yeah, it was just a quick fix type thing. I'll take that. And that's not necessarily the GP's fault. At times, I've probably criticised GPs quite a lot because they do that, and it's seen so often. But then actually now I work with a lot of GPs and I've sat down with them. It's so hard for them because they literally have got 10 minutes and they want to help you. So sometimes, and they're told sometimes that is what they have to do. But yeah, I think that was part of it. And then I also felt like I wanted to fix the root cause. I was adamant that's what I wanted to do. And I'd been brought up with other people around me that had struggled with mental health, that had never dealt with the root causes, which had then impacted on me heavily. And I still think that impacted on my own mental health. That when I then went to get help, I struggled just because I was sort of seen as one, you don't really talk about it. So I just wanted to try and, I suppose, start a new slate and be the person that actually dealt with those causes and got help and tried to stop that circle of happening, or the cycle of happening down generations, for example. So yeah, I was trying to I wanted to steal those root causes, really.
Yeah, and what was it about kind of tending to your allotment and growing things that you think was so beneficial for your mental health? And was it necessary? Do you think you could have recovered in the way that you did if you didn't combine it with the psychotherapy and the kind of one-on-one CBT?
There's no way on earth I would be where I am today if it wasn't for the allotment and grow my own food. There's no doubt about it. I think because I started growing my own food in 2015, and I didn't have the private psychotherapy until, I want to say, 2017. Yeah, so it's about 2 years later. And that was when I got to the point when I had a total breakdown. And I had people around me say, like, I wasn't even able to work properly at work. I thought I was. And then I had, like, my manager pulled me into the room. I had someone else that had heard about what was going on. They sort of pulled me one to one side and was like, "You okay? We think you probably should be signed off and you should probably get help." And I was like, "No." So it got to that point where I was having serious paranoia that I was still sort of trying to sort of go through the motion, pretend I was okay. But that was probably where the psychotherapy then came into play. But so I'd say the allotment for those 2 years and beyond, it just gave me a purpose and a place where I could go, and also a thing to believe in and a reason to believe in myself, and to keep going and to keep trying to get out of the situations that I was in, or for example to keep going with my degree and to do well in my degree. And it just gave me that escapism place. But it also, as I said, you have these tiny seeds which look like nothing, and at that point I sort of saw all my dreams and hopes as these tiny things of nothing that I wasn't sure if I could ever achieve. And then what I noticed with the seeds was actually if I gave them a bit of love and a bit of care and food and water, and some support, then they could bloom into these amazing different things. And I thought then it made me realize, one, we're so similar to a plant. Some would say we have more complicated emotions, but now I've dealt with a lot of plants, I would say we're pretty much on par as well with that, because all plants are super fussy as well. But yeah, it just gave me that connection. I thought, okay, what if I apply the same theory of what plants need to myself? So if I give myself amount of care, the same amount of patience, actually, because I'm awful with patience. I've got better over the years thanks to plants, but otherwise my patience is shocking. What if I can play those same theories, and what if it would help with either sticking with my old career in terms of progressing, what if it could help me with uni, what if it help me get out of that relationship, or just generally believe in myself a bit more. And that's what it gave me. And you can't help but feel a bit more proud of yourself, I think, which is a really important word. And when you sit there outside, which is a generally more calming space than four walls anyway sometimes, if it's a safe environment, and just look at everything that I'd grown around me was all me. And I just think that, yeah, was definitely a great sense of pride. And you can't go say, oh no, that wasn't me, or I had the help of other people, and try and sort of not knock it down a bit, but you know what I mean, in terms of, yeah, you have to take the full pride of it because it is all you. So that was, I think that's why it really helped a lot. And it's just the natural thing of being outside in nature, I think, and there was less noise. There was no pressure to get it right or to get it wrong. There was nobody constantly watching me or judging me, whereas I think a lot of aspects otherwise, especially with your mental health, I felt like there was a lot of people watching me or waiting to see what I did, especially when I got to the paranoia point where you're just thinking, yeah, everybody's judging me. Whereas at the allotment, I could go there and nobody was really judging me. It was just my little place where I could escape.
So what made you want to start bringing this into schools and then eventually into adults as well? And how tough was that transition to doing that and then eventually quitting your job?
Yeah, I think the decision to want to do it was there before I even had a clue how I was going to do it. I think I just decided that I had to do it. It was more of this thing of, yeah, I just have to do this. I have to come up with something that helps other people, that so that when whether they're a child or whether they're in their 20s like I was, that can go to their GP and you never know, they might be offered a third option, whether that's gardening as a therapy or whether that's sport, music, art therapy. I've always wanted there to be another third option or a couple of other alternative options for people where tablets or group CBT, for example, doesn't work. Or, as you said, the waiting list sometimes for group CBT, and especially for one-to-one, is ridiculous, and most people can't afford a private one-to-one either. I was lucky through my old work they funded it, otherwise I could never afford the thousands of pounds that it costs. So I think it came from there, and I'd always said actually I wanted to do it for adults, and then I talked about it at a show a few years ago at Gardeners World Live, and there was a little girl in the audience called Isabel, who was 8 at the time. And I talked about, I wanted to create these adult programs, create the adult site, which is what I've done. But she turned around at the end of it and she was really upset, and she's talking to me about her story. And she said, "You've made me believe in myself," which one was emotional. I was an emotional wreck, as you can imagine. But she also turned around and she looked at me really seriously and went, "But what about me?" And in that second, and I've never hesitated it ever since, is I went, right, I'm doing schools. And I thought, I don't have a clue how I'm going to do schools. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to find a way, and I'm going to do something that would be for her and her age group. So that's very much where it came from. And then it came from just trying to play around and put things together to do it. And then I started approaching schools, and it's something totally different that they've never seen or done before. But luckily one school gave it a go, and they started seeing the results because I track them, and there's like feedback forms at the end of it and things like that. And you started seeing the changes in the girls, and especially when they noticed it themselves even more. That's even more powerful. But then it was started thinking, right, okay, this is working. And then I opened the adult site, and that's already working. Within a couple of weeks, I had someone turn around to me and they just said, "Thank you so much, because you've given me somewhere safe that I can go that's outside." And that means everything to me. So I think, to be here now and to doing it is quite surreal in a way. But I think actually what it's done is made me able to make sense of everything. Because I think when you're struggling with mental health or any sort of ill health, you can look at it and go, why was I put through all of that? Why did I have to go through all of those different situations? Why couldn't someone scoop me up a little bit earlier and helped me? Or why couldn't I be more resilient and handled it in a different way where maybe I didn't care? And actually I think now doing what I do, I wouldn't be able to do what I do now and help the people that I do if I hadn't been through everything that I've been through, because otherwise I'd be totally unrelatable. And that's what I base what I work on, is more relatability and experience more than qualifications. I've done some now, but it's still nowhere to the degree of like other people that do the work. But I think I've got that experience that actually money can't buy, and it makes it a lot more easier for me to understand and go, right, okay, I went through all of that, and this is the reason why, so I can now help other people with their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably what makes you so good at what you do, is that people can relate to you. And something that's been I suppose quite a pressing issue, and with the people that we've spoken to before about kind of nature and mental health, is I'm not quite sure where you work, but particularly during when people were trapped inside during the lockdown period, a lot of people with kind of gardens and green spaces were saying that was a refuge for them, and a place that they kind of enjoyed spending time in, and that actually for them the kind of lockdown wasn't too bad because they had that space. Does your work take people that may not have access to those green spaces or those allotments and introduce them to something new?
So in terms of lockdown was really tough, obviously, because it limited, I think, all the mental health service supports had to totally shut, which was awful, and just sent me into a right panic anyway, because I was just thinking all these people are already struggling, now they're going to be even worse with no support. But I think now what I do with the adult therapy is I give people that they might have a garden. I don't question whether they have a garden or not, to be honest, but I give them their own mini allotment outside space where they can come, and it's in a safe environment, and there's not too many people, but everyone there is struggling with some sort of degree of mental health. They don't know what they all are. I do, obviously, for safety and things like that, but they don't. But they know that everyone is there in a mission to try and get better, to rebuild themselves and have some sort of control and ownership, and hope that plants help. So I give out outdoor spaces to people, and then they have my support, whether it's from a mental health perspective or from a gardening advice perspective, then that's what I'm there for. So yeah, I suppose, yeah, that's what I do. And then schools, it's all outdoors, but it's using in the outdoor spaces that schools have. And then sometimes it's in a classroom setting, which seems a bit weird for a nature-based program. But for example, if you're working with, so I work a lot, as I said, with teenage girls, and some of them will wear lots of makeup, and actually sometimes that's the way they get through the day. That's the way they survive, because they're struggling with all those issues of what beauty is, how beauty is, and they might already be struggling with self-harm and different things like that. So their makeup is the only way they get through the day and can go to school and can do everything that they do. So if I said we're going outside in the rain to do digging, that is the worst thing I could possibly do to that child. So actually when it's raining, I will say, right, we're staying indoors, but we bring it inside. So, and I make it more relatable, especially for teenagers. So we'll do natural lip balms, and they have to learn about all the botanicals of the plants and how to extract the oils. But at the end of it, they get to make their own lip balm, which makes it more fun. They just have the plants. So it's still plants linked into it. And we did the same with body scrubs and things like that. So it's just adapting it and changing it, one, for the people that are on the program, but also, yeah, for what I think is relatable and more needed for those individuals. But as much as we can, if it's sunny, then we're outside, and then help you getting their input into redesigning the school space. And that's sometimes they're weeding, sometimes they're digging, sometimes they're planting. Yeah, they get a mixture of all different things.
Kind of related to the last question, can you see that, I don't know if you feel the same, but I feel like there's been a bit of a greater appreciation of nature during the last few months, and even an increased interest in growing your own stuff and tending to plants. Can you see that becoming a more permanent thing, like people taking that appreciation of nature and the joy of kind of growing things? Can you see that transitioning into our everyday lives whenever we return back to a kind of some sense of normality?
Yeah, I hope so, more than anything. Is my initial answer. I really, really hope so, because I was speaking to someone else about it, who's a psychologist, and she was saying she's done a lot of research into nature as well and things like that. And we were saying that actually, if you look right back to like World War I and stuff like that, in times of crisis like this as well, we've always gone back to nature and growing our own food. It's just a natural thing that for some reason we do. And I do it anyway, but you've seen people that would never, like, you'd never imagine would be into gardening over lockdown, that have suddenly gone into lockdown, like started gardening and growing their own food. And it is the best feeling, and it is helping so many people and giving them a purpose and a lifeline. But it's also just keeping people busy, I think, without going, yeah, but don't take it too deep. I think it just gives people something to do. And if they've got an outside space, it's finally giving them an opportunity to maybe appreciate it a bit more, because they can't go anywhere else. So actually, let's focus in and try and make use of what we've actually got a bit more and appreciate that a bit more, which I think is really powerful. And actually, if we can all appreciate nature, I think that's going to be a massive thing, positive to come out of lockdown, is if we all actually just appreciate what we've all got a bit more in terms of the outside and the environment, and we all look after it a bit more. But yeah, I really hope it's something that people stick to and they sort of see why it's helping, and not just because they're getting food out of it and it's this panic thing. I hope they suddenly realise those natural things that are helping as well with their own mental health, or whether it's just an escape, actually, because I think you've suddenly got lots of families that are suddenly in lockdown together, which might normally not be all together at the same time 24/7. They'd be at work all of a sudden, which is suddenly creating, sometimes it's doing relationships and families it's done really well for them. For others, actually, it's created a really volatile, dangerous situation that might have already been there slightly, but with lockdown, it's made it 10 times worse. So I think with the garden, at least it's giving people an escape and somewhere to go, whether they're just sitting in it or whether they're growing their own food, really.
Yeah, can you see, like, after we kind of do go back to normality, can you see the way that we design our buildings and schools in particular and our cities can you see the way that we design them changing to incorporate more green spaces and nature? Because you see, I was reading about a hospital in Singapore where it's covered in green stuff, and they're kind of the rates of I can't remember if it's specifically a mental health hospital, but their rates of recovery have increased, and even I think there's data to show that if a patient has a bed that looks out over a green space compared to looking out over concrete or just a wall, that really helps to improve their kind of just general well-being.
Yeah, it's not funny, it's interesting because you say that, and that is one of the studies I've looked at a lot, and it's right, is that whole theory. But it's when you think about it and you think, well, okay, we know that green space works, especially for people in hospitals and things like that, or people that are vulnerable and they can see wider, they can see further, and it helps for me. I've even thought when I've been stuck in four walls, actually it minimises your creativity, it minimises everything. So I think, yeah, opening it out to the outdoor space is going to give you more a natural space, I suppose. It's about green space. It's definitely going to help. Whether or not it changes how we build, I really hope so. It's a tough one because I think you'll always have, this isn't not me being negative, but you'll always have people that are more money focused, that want to build big high-rise flats and sell them all off, and make a load of money out of green land. But I really hope that even those people start to question it a bit more. Or say, for example, they do decide they want to build a high-rise block of flats in a green space. Maybe they might think about making sure that they keep a good amount of green space around that block of flats, for example, instead of putting up 2 high-rise blocks of flat and then just leaving them in a little concrete space to sit outside. I really do hope it will change people's, how people think about things going forward. I hope, it's a tricky question to say a definite thing on, but I just really hope that it does. I totally live off grid on a narrowboat, so I can say I'm pretty much out of it, but I really hope it does change ways. I think it does with hospital gardens and things like that. I think they definitely see the value. Schools definitely see the value. I think even now, going back in September, I speak to a lot of schools because I work in them, but they've already said, even in September, they're not sure how things are going to be. So but they can do a lot more outside. So you can have more children outside, because the risk is so much lower of, for example, COVID, particularly at the minute. So I think having those outdoor spaces are crucial, whether it's just to be able to educate children more efficiently in the near future, but just as a place to learn, because actually for example, I'm not a sit down in a classroom type of person. I think that's why I didn't like school as well. I learn by doing. I'm very much hands-on. I'm creative. So I would have learned a lot more if they'd put me outside every single day than if they'd kept me in a classroom every single day. And I hope that maybe it highlights that to teachers and schools a lot more, and they think about having maybe more outdoor classrooms and allowing that to be a possibility, and not just constantly from 9 till 3:30 in a class, in an indoor space.
Yeah, I think when they brought schools back in Denmark, it was mandated that they had to be outside. I don't know if that's still going on, but I suppose one benefit of this whole period is that schools will have to think differently about how to teach kids, and that might result in, I suppose, kind of more holistic curriculum and more innovative ideas.
Yeah, that's what I really hope so. Anyway, and with businesses as well. I think, let's take it all to do as much as we can. If we can take as much of it outside, it's going to do the staff a world of good, which will then impact on people's work and their performance. Even if you're in an office and you've got a green view out the window, I do think, as hippy dippy as it sounds, I do think it will improve how people perform at work and how happy they are if they've got a window with a green space and not just 4 walls, for example, or a window onto a horrible view. I do think it makes a difference.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd agree, but I can definitely see that becoming a bit of a trend that across kind of well-being and mental health generally, that companies who are very much profit driven are now starting to realise that actually you do really need to look after the health of your employees, because actually if you look after them better, they'll be more productive, and they'll talk about how good it is to work there. So it kind of just makes sense, really. So yeah, to finish, we always ask how you personally look after your own mental health.
It's a mixture, and I think actually, yeah, it's quite an interesting one because a lot of people go, "Are you still looking after yourself?" Because obviously, yeah, I've had my whole history, and I still have to do a lot of the coping mechanisms I learned through that, and I still suffer with like some PTSD trauma from different parts of my life and stuff. So from the more of the abusive side of stuff, I still have trauma flashbacks and have to deal with that all the time. So I think it's allowing myself to feel those emotions is something that is one, how I embrace it. I think before I'd tried to shun or tried to just put them to one side and forget about it if I was feeling anxious, or whereas now I've learned actually that doesn't work. You can't get rid of those negative thoughts in your head by just trying to think about just going, right, I want to forget them. It doesn't work. Unfortunately, I remember when my psychiatrist told me that, and I was not happy. She was like, you can't do it like that. You've got to embrace it. And so if I'm having a sad day or I'm just down, what I've learned now actually is just to embrace that sadness, and not sort of dwell on it, but just go, right, okay, accept it, and then say, okay, right, that was my plan for today, but how can I change that plan to do better with, to cope better with how I'm feeling and to manage it a lot better. Sometimes I'll change my day and my whole plan just so I know that I can handle that feeling better. And I think that's actually really important. And then also my garden is huge for me. So it's all containers now on the towpath because I gave up my personal allotment when I gave up my old career and my house and stuff last year to do what I do. But I've still got 65 foot worth of and 4 rows deep of containers, which is my garden, which is definitely helps me. And then last year I took up knitting. So I get stereotypically called an old lady a lot, but it massively helps as well. I think with knitting, it's just one of those other creative things where you're making something out of a ball of wool, which doesn't really look like a lot, but you can make a garment or a scarf or things like that. And it's quite sensory based with the fabric and stuff. So I think between those two is physical activities, and then just talking a lot more. I'm a lot more open. I ask for a lot more help now than what I did before. I've realised I can't do everything on my own. And just embracing those moments and gradually working through them and having people around me that understands when I'm having a trauma trigger flashback, that actually they help me embrace it and work through it instead of trying to and understand it. I think, and people trying to understand, if you try and understand people's mental health, I think that can make a big difference. I think that's what my biggest ask is for people, is actually if you try and understand mental health, and don't be afraid to ask people that you know that might be struggling with mental health, ask them questions like what might help that particular person, how they feel, and really try and understand it. So I think otherwise people can be quite judgmental or stereotype people, but I think that would do a lot of good as well.
Yeah, I think you were saying about kind of knitting and stuff, something that's really helped me during this time is I'm living in my granddad's old house, and I kind of knew he was a carpenter, and I kind of knew he had, like, in my memory, I knew he had like a shed where he used to go and do like work stuff, but I couldn't remember where it was. And anyway, I was kind of looking in the garage, and then found this door, like tried to push it, didn't work. So came back the next day, and then I realised it was a sliding door. So I slid it open, and there's this kind of amazing workshop in there. And I've been kind of doing, or not very well, but I've been trying to do like woodwork and stuff like that. And that has been, for some reason, that has just been so beneficial to my own mental health, because I think it's, I don't know if it's the same for you while knitting, but I just can't really think of anything else while I'm doing it. Like, I just kind of, you hear kind of athletes saying about being in the zone, but I kind of feel like that's very similar. I just don't think about anything else. I just think about what I'm doing, which is really nice.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. even if it switches off. I used to do running and bodybuilding and stuff like that, and even that helped until my knees decided that they didn't want me to do it anymore. But even that, it's finding something that you enjoy, whether or not you're good, as you say, whether or not you're that good at it or not, it doesn't really matter. It's finding something that enables you, to switch off and just forget everything that's going around or circling in your head, and make something that you've made, whether it's like good enough to sell or not, but whether like it's just something that you've made and you can feel it and you've got that texture in your hand. And then I think it's double whammy. It helps forget things, but it also makes you believe in yourself and achieve something that maybe you didn't think you were able to achieve before, with a bit of time and patience.
Yeah, Annabelle, that's been really interesting, and the advice that you gave just before I kind of interrupted with my woodwork story was really good. Just to finish, where can we find more about what you do, about your work and all that stuff?
So I've got the main website, which is www.life@number27.com, and then I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's mainly it. I've got a YouTube channel, but some of the videos are really old now. So I need to do a bit more when I've got a bit more time. But that's pretty much where you can then find me. And then every so often, in a normal year, I'm doing quite a few of the shows and stuff like that.
Brilliant. Annabelle, that's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Just a quick note to say, although the things Annabelle and I talked about we may find helpful, we're not trained medical professionals. If you're struggling with your mental health, please contact your GP or an organisation like Samaritans on 116 123.